I'll say welcome to this webinar on the Higher Education Evaluation Library, or HEAL. I'm Eliza Cosman. Next slide, please, Tatiana. I'm Eliza Cosman. I'm Deputy Chief Executive of TASO and looking after the HEAL development in the Research and Evaluation team here. I'm joined today by Dr. Anna Anthony, who is Director of HEAT, the Higher Education Access Tracker, Tatiana Damjanovic, who's Senior Research Officer at TASO, and Rachel Edgar, who's a Research Consultant at HEAT. Next slide, please. So as you start, I'm going to ask you to stay on mute. You appear to all be doing that already, which is great. And keep your cameras off as well for now. You won't be able to see very much anyway. You should just be able to see our slides, but there will be an opportunity for you to talk to each other and indeed hear each other later in breakout sessions. So we want to wait until you're in those groups for you to have a conversation and provide nice, rich feedback into this consultation. Please don't use the chat function either. We're not using that piece of functionality for this webinar. We'll be using Slido instead, and we'll show you a slide on that in a second. But if you have some problems, I think you can still use the chat function to let the team know. I'll repeat that in a second for anyone who joins late, but just to say that right at the top of the webinar. What we're going to cover today is an overview of the HEAL. We're going to tell you a little bit about how we're developing it. We're going to touch on our plans for submission into the HEAL and how you might use it. And then there'll be an opportunity, as I said, for talking to each other, providing your thoughts and feedback, and then a Q&A session at the end. And next slide, please, Tatiana. Tatiana, can you jump in here and explain how Slido is going to work for the webinar today?
Sorry, I'm struggling to unmute myself. Yes, so we're going to use the Q&A function via Slido today. So if you have a question come up while we're talking, we will have the breakouts later. You will have an opportunity to do this later, but if you'd like to note them down in the meantime, please do join Slido via this number. We'll also put the link in the chat as well, so you can just press on that, but I'll just give you a moment. You can just go directly on slido.com and put in this number 393-8149.
Thank you very much. And just for anyone who has joined us a little bit later, if you could stay on mute and keep your cameras off for now, you'll have the opportunity to unmute and reveal your faces later in the breakout sessions. And please don't use the chat function because we'll be using the Slido. Okay, hopefully I've caught most of you with that info, but if anyone comes on later and starts chatting away, then I might have to send a reminder out again. So what is the HEAL? The HEAL is the Higher Education Evaluation Library, and is going to be an online library of evaluations of interventions in the higher education sector related to access, success and progression. So we're interested in any evaluation that looks at any intervention related to that whole student life cycle, stuff that happens before you go into HE, stuff that happens on course, and interventions which are designed to improve the outcomes of students after they leave to higher education. So we've got a very broad set of things that we're interested in embracing in the HEAL. Next slide, please. The HEAL has been a long time coming, as I think I recently posted on social media. I think for many years we've been saying, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we had a library of all of these evaluations that were happening? So it's really welcome that this has happened now, and I think it's also a really good time for it to happen in terms of where TASO is and where evaluation is and where HEAT is on the journey to build more and better evaluation in the sector. So as you probably know, because you're here on a TASO webinar, TASO has been established and we've been running for about five years now, I think, a long time, to try and build evaluation practice and support in the sector. And the HEAL is going to be a really important next step in that journey. We have done a lot of work on how to do evaluations. So some of you may know our research projects better. These are our kind of big flagship projects, but we also just do a lot of work on how to do evaluation. So we've commissioned previous projects on the ethics of doing evaluation projects, but also publishing them, and how you do that in line with kind of general ethical principles, but also making sure you're tied into your local ethical processes. We've done work on knowledge mobilization to try and understand what the barriers are to people doing more, particularly type 3 evidence using the Office for Students standards of evidence, but also just kind of sharing and doing more evaluation generally. We've also tried to develop some tools that allow a more standardized approach and a more coherent approach to evaluation across the sector, because although there are big differences in between institutions, and context is really important in how interventions work, many of us are still working on similar activities and similar evaluation designs. So, for example, we developed our mapping outcomes and activities tool to try and provide a more standardized approach to how we list activities and label them in our evaluations and how they link to outcomes. And that's something that we're looking to bake in to all of our future work on evaluation, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you do an evaluation, basically. We've also, this project comes partly on the back of our student mental health project, and we have I think, a really lovely toolkit on student mental health support. And this was a big piece of work to review all of the existing evidence that we could find on higher education support for student mental health. We published that last year, or possibly the year before. I can't quite remember when the year dates fall. But as part of that project, we were just pulling together huge numbers of evaluations. And so the HEAL is a natural next step in this journey of consolidating the evaluation support and guidance that we currently provide. And of course, importantly for you, this comes at a really crucial time when the Office for Students has asked you to publish your evaluations in your access and participation plans. So there is a really clear need from the sector to have somewhere which is a good, helpful, easy to access place to publish your work. And I hope that the HEAL will be able to do that for you. Next slide, please. So as you'll see from our colleagues Anna and Rachel on the call, this is a partnership, and we have partnered up to develop the HEAL because we have different areas of expertise. I've nattered on about why TASO are experts in evaluation, but he have a whole bunch of expertise, not just in their evaluation planning work and their data mapping work, but also in database development and management. And we've had several really productive working relationships with HEAT on various different projects, for example, integrating the moat. So we're hoping to build on that. We also know that over 80% of the sector already use HEAT. So we want to capitalise on that. And that's just to demonstrate how, with everything we're going to do with the HEAL, we want to make it as easy as possible for you to use, because we know there's already a lot of friction in your work. So that's really top of our mind. And we'd like to learn more from you about how we make this as easy as possible. Next slide, please. So what are the objectives? So we think there are 4 key objectives of the HEAL. If you think of others, please let us know. But these are the ones that we're working towards. We primarily want this to create a culture of sharing and learning. And I think the evaluation sector is actually very good at this already. And what we lack is a kind of practical way of sharing and learning. We held our TASO annual conference last week, and I saw a room full of people all really desperate to share how they'd learned, what they'd learned from their evaluations, and how they were going to carry on doing their evaluation work. And so hopefully the HEAL would be the kind of tool that would allow that and reduce the friction in that process. We also want to enable the exchange of knowledge. So literally, what did you find out from these evaluations, and make sure that other people can build on that and build it into their future work and inform the development of their interventions. We at TASO want to use the evidence that goes into the HEAL to inform our evidence toolkits. So our toolkits are only as good as the evidence that we have access to, and we're looking at refreshing and updating the way that we use our toolkits, and the HEAL would be a really key part of that. And then fourthly, we want to support your dissemination. So this is something the OFS has asked you to do, and hopefully the HEAL will be a way of you being able to feel like you've really disseminated your evaluation effectively. Next slide, please. So how can the HEAL be used? Well, there are two sides to this. If you've joined this call today, you're probably one of the more interested parties in the HEAL. Perhaps you're an evaluator or a practitioner or a manager, and you have some nice reports that you would like to publish. And we hope that the HEAL would be somewhere that you do just that. So this will be somewhere you go in to publish your evaluations and to share the knowledge and the learning, but also to fulfill your requirement, your obligation to share your evaluation findings. And on the flip side, there's probably a much broader, bigger pool of people who would like to search this library. So even the people who publish will be interested in searching, but there are probably lots of other people as well who would like to search and find. And so we're thinking about both sides of that user experience as we design the HEAL. Next slide, please. And we've identified a few different user groups who we think are the key ones, and we'll be trying to talk to people from all of these different groups as we develop the HEAL design. So we're interested in the views of planners who might want to have access to a library of existing evidence to inform the strategic approach to APPs, practitioners who want just an ideas bank to kind of pick from and learn from and improve their activities or design new activities. Evaluators might want to pick up evaluation designs, and see exactly how that's being carried out by other providers. Maybe they're looking for particular measures or outcomes that are being used as well, and that might be a good place to go. Next slide, please. And we also think that academics might be interested. There isn't a kind of a pool of academic researchers working in this space, and hopefully this would be a good resource for them. Student bodies, we'll be doing some work this year to try and understand better how student voice can feature in evaluation. But we think students are a really key audience of people who would actually like to know the activities and evaluations that are taking place. And then finally, private and third sector. And that's a bit of a different group. And we'd be really interested to hear about how you work with private and third sector organisations and maybe the practicalities of getting them to publish their evaluation reports on the HEAL. Next slide, please. A common question is about what types of evaluations will be included. And the answer is a really, really broad range of evaluation types. It's a long list here. The main focus, the focus is on evaluations of interventions. So it's got to be testing a thing. That's what the HEAL is there for, to tell us about evaluations of activities. But in terms of methodology, we have a really broad set of types that would be included in there. And we have a full list on the screen to kind of get ahead of some of your questions on this. That's qualitative and quantitative evaluation types in there. So this is not restricted to just quantitative evaluation. I think it's a slight misconception I've seen from some of the feedback so far. Next slide, please. And so Taso, how will we use the HEAL? Well, we are very keen to get our hands on the HEAL for two reasons. So number one will be our digests. And what we'd like to do is, once the evidence has started flowing into the HEAL, we will produce regular digests telling us what's inside it. So this will be a descriptive exercise. We want to know what kinds of evidence are being submitted. Are we seeing a growth in particular types of methodologies, particular types of institutions, for example? We kind of have to wait to see what's in there until we develop these digests, but we'll be providing those on a regularish basis. To try and keep you all updated with how the HEAL is growing and what we can learn from it in a descriptive sense. And then on the other side, we will also be using the HEAL to inform our evidence toolkits. And this is where we will use the evidence to inform the guidance we provide on whether and how interventions are effective. So this is the point at which we would do more of the typical synthesis of evidence. We would appraise the evidence for strength, and then we would find a way of combining it in a way that's most useful for the sector and providing a narrative about what kind of evidence exists, what the strengths and weaknesses are, and what we can learn from it in terms of which activities are most effective. Next slide, please. So just to hammer that point home, because I think this is definitely a key issue that's come up a little bit in conversations. when we get our evaluations in the heel, we're going to use it for two purposes. So if we click through here, Tatiana, to give me a couple of clicks, there we go. On the one hand, we have all the lovely digests, which provide summaries of key trends in evaluation. And on the other hand, we'll have the evidence toolkits where we'll be appraising the evidence. But the evidence won't be appraised at the point of submitting it to the heel. TASO is not going to sit here checking your submissions when you put them in. We will be looking at the evidence and assessing it for inclusion in our toolkits, but the heel is a much broader tool, which is a resource for the sector. So we will not be checking your submissions at the point of checking your entries at the point of submission. Next slide, please. And so development of the heel, this is still a very much a live issue. You are some of the first people through the door in terms of providing your feedback. So thank you very much for signing up today. We really want this to be what you want. Obviously, there are restrictions. We cannot create, it won't be able to do absolutely everything. So we have to make sure we prioritize the parts of the design that are most important to you. And that's something that we want to hear from you about today, and also following the webinar. And so we've undergone a period of scoping and planning, and we're now in step 2 on the timeline you can see on the screen, which is whole sector engagement. We've been running a number of engagement exercises in our ongoing stakeholder engagement work at our conference last week, for example, but now we're opening this out with our webinars, and you may be hearing from us in some other formats over the coming weeks and months. Based on that engagement, we will be updating and changing the design. It's not fixed yet. The point of the consultation is that you will help us design the tool. And once we have a design, we will come back to you, and there will be opportunities for developing and user testing that design. We will launch in spring 2026. That's our aim. So watch this space, and I hope that will still be a timely production of a tool to support your work. I'll also say that I think this will evolve over time, even after that point, because the sector evolves over time and what we need evolves over time. So we will need to continue to respond to what the sector needs are. So please work with us to make sure that this is as effective and useful as possible. Next slide, please, Tatiana. Over to Anna.
Thanks, Eliza, and hi, everyone. So I am going to talk about the more practical aspects of the heel. So how it will look from a technical perspective, how it will work, and where you will access it. Just before I do that, for anyone here who isn't familiar with HEAT, we are a collaboration of universities and third sector organisations all working together to provide a shared system and data for the evaluation of equality of opportunity work. We are open to new members, so if please look us up and get in touch if you're interested in joining. But now back to the heel, and I wanted to start with a focus on the how and the where you will access it. So Eliza talked earlier about the 2 ways you will be able to use the heel: to publish your evaluations to the library, and also to search the library for evaluations that other people have published. So you can contribute your own evaluation and or view other organisations' evaluations. So those 2 elements or stages will happen in 2 different places. If you want to contribute your evaluation to the heel, and we really hope you do, you will submit it through the HEAT system. The HEAT system is not publicly accessible, but you will be given a login if you don't already have one. And once you click publish, your evaluation will then appear in a new HEAL website, which isn't part of the HEAT system. This will be a new website where people will go to search the library. And that library with all the published submissions will be publicly accessible. So here you and the public will be able to view your evaluation reports alongside everyone else's. On this slide on the screen now, you can see more information about the submission and publishing process. So this is the first element I was talking about, the process if you want to contribute your own evaluation to the heel. And there are 3 steps. Step 1 is to log into the HEAT system. Now, HEAT members already have access, and they will see a new heel section on the left-hand menu when they log in after December's technical update. The ability to submit to the HEAL will be role-based, which will make sense to all the HEAP members here. What this means is that where a HEAP member organisation will have many users all logging into the system to record their activities and their students, many of those users won't ever need to publish to the HEAL, and you'll be able to restrict your users' ability to do that. Non-HEAP members who don't currently have access to the system will be able to get a free login to just access this new HEAL submission area of our system. Right, so once you're in, we can move on to step 2, which is filling out a submission form, giving information about your evaluation. And I've got another slide on that next. But once you've done that, all that remains to be done is to click publish or submit, and the information you've entered will instantly push through to the library. This will be the part that's hosted on the separate publicly accessible website. So as Eliza said, no one will be reading through and verifying your submissions. It will appear instantly in the library once you've submitted it through the HEAT system. That will be done through an API for those of us who are technical, but that's really a data transfer or a data exchange. And that is essentially how it will work. So hopefully that's clear, but if you do have any questions, we've got a Q&A later, so please do ask us. Now, if we move on to the next slide, I've just got 3 more slides to show you because we wanted to give you some visuals to help you see what it might look like. So we've created some mock-ups, but wherever you see an image, you will also see this text box that you can see on the screen saying that details may change. And that's because we've not built this yet and we've not finished the consultation yet. So it's very likely that the detail will change once we've heard your feedback and what you want out of the library. Having said that, it's likely that the submission form will look something like this, with a sort of tab layout that you can see, where you'll be asked to populate some fields giving information about your evaluation. And those fields will probably be either free text boxes or drop-down boxes where you select a value. And then you'll also be able to upload some file attachments. So all of this information that you upload at this point or add at this point, including your file attachments, will then be pushed through to the library and be available for others to view and download. Next slide, please. Right, so on this slide, we've got some more detail about the kind of information you will add to those fields in the tabs in the previous slide. So we've got some general fields about who you are and the organisation you're from. Then we've got some details about your intervention, who it was delivered to, etc. Then we've got some information about your evaluation, things like the methods you've used and the outcomes. Then a summary of your findings, and that will allow you to pick out some of the key messages for anyone searching the library to view without having to download the full reports that you attach. And then we've got the file attachments, which could be things like a theory of change, a research protocol, and of course, your interim or your final reports. Like with the screenshot slide, it's important for me to say that these are examples, and we really want to know what kind of information you would find useful to share in the HEAL. So once we have heard all of your feedback and collated that, the details on this slide are likely to change. Also, not all of these fields need to be compulsory. However, the more that is populated here, the more fields we will all have to search on in the HEAL. And although the file attachments, number 5 on the screen, will be really useful and provide a lot of that detailed content for each submission, the library itself won't be able to search on the content of those file attachments. Only the information entered into the submission form and will be searchable content. So we're really relying on items 1 to 4 on the screen to provide the searchable fields. And next slide, please. Right, so this is my last slide, and I wanted to show you what the searchable library, the HEAL, might look like. Again, this is just a mock-up image, but it will be possible to have filters to search on, and we also envisage there being some sort of sort functionality and hopefully a search box, a search text box. And then a function where you click on an intervention and view that summary information we talked about before. But then if you want to click to download the full report, which will consist of everything that's entered into the submission form and all the file attachments, then you can do that. But really, we want to hear about what you would like to filter and search on when you use the HEAL, so that we can make sure that we build that functionality in to the submission form, which will really determine what's available for searching and filtering. So that's hopefully what we're going to get started on today and hear back from you. That brings us to the end of my slides. So I'll hand back to Eliza and Tatiana to start the discussion. Thank you.
So the first question that we had was around the review process. There were a few questions about what the choices behind that were. And Eliza, I wonder if you can expand a bit on that for us.
Yes, so just to clarify and reiterate, when you submit to the HEAL, the submission won't be checked for quality or kind of categorized into different evidence types by TASO. That's a common misconception I think we're trying to head off right from the beginning. The HEAL is a library for the sector, so it is up to you as higher education institutions to decide what reports you want to publish as part of your drive to publish under APPs, and make sure that they are of sufficient quality and they are things that you want to share and have permission to share. And then the HEAL is the right place for you to share those evaluation reports. So we really are just trying to make this a space for you to share and learn and disseminate as a community of evaluators, practitioners, managers, planners, etc. The point at which the appraisal or kind of quality assessment, I suppose, would happen would be when we look at that and we adopt the evidence into our toolkits. And that's where we have a very clear set of criteria that we use to identify the evidence which answers the questions that TASO is interested in answering. So we primarily, we have a set of evidence standards that we use to filter and then synthesize that evidence. But that doesn't mean that other people won't have other ways of synthesizing evidence, and they may want to go into the HEAL themselves and look at the evidence sources and apply a different lens and a different set of criteria to that evidence to provide their own summaries and their own synthesis. And so this way of collating the evidence essentially preserves that transparency and that pool of evaluation data, which then is open. So this is in line with our open science principles and just preserving the autonomy of the sector to share and learn from each other as far as possible. But TASO still has a role in applying our standards, and we will do that through our toolkits. I hope that answers the question.
Could I just pick up on the fact that somebody asked about having a field to indicate standards of evidence? So I think that links with this as well. So we can certainly think about having a field whereby you mark the standard of evidence that you think you're submitting, but it would be self-reported. So just to reiterate what Eliza's saying, everything you're putting in the submission is your assessment of what you've been doing and the information that you're putting in. And then Eliza and TASO's digests are separate to the submission, but supporting the sector in terms of synthesizing everything. So we could certainly look at something like the standards of evidence field or any other field like that, but they would be self-reported.
Thank you. Just to quickly follow on from that, there was a question, and this has come up a few times, about GDPR. So if that's not being reviewed, are there any risks to sharing sensitive data? I don't know if Eliza or Anna want to take that.
Anna, do you want to?
At this time, we are working on the basis that we would be saying that there should be no sharing of personal data through the HEAL. And that's so that message is sort of unambiguous, that when you upload your content, you would be agreeing to some terms and conditions at the point of submission that you will not be sharing, that the content you're sharing doesn't contain any personal data. We can look at guidance to make sure that we help you sufficiently to be confident that you're not sharing any personal data, because it's sharing of personal data is one thing in a spreadsheet, but then there are certain other ways that you could inadvertently do it through things like statistical disclosure. So I think we've also got some work to do to make sure we support you. But at the moment, that is the situation that we're working with, where we would be asking you to confirm that you are not sharing personal data through the HEAL.
Lovely, thank you. I'm going to move us on. There was a question for you, Anna. Is there a way that we could attach the submission of specific activities in HEAT?
Shall I pass that one over to you, Rachel, to answer, because you're a bit closer to the technical development?
Yes, so when we originally started scoping the project, we did have the idea that we would have it as part of our evaluation plans tool. Because of all the ways that it's developed, we are now looking at having a separate section on the HEAT website. So it's not going to be linked in any way to what is going on in the system if you are a HEAT member. Okay, so that's as we speak at the moment, and that's for this part of the development. When we go forward, so once we've got the HEAL established and it's starting to work, we're not saying that that's the end of development. There's the possibility that we could develop other things. So I know there were other people asking about all sorts of other things to do with linking stuff that's already in HEAT for them as HEAT members. So there's always the possibility that we can do that, but it won't be in this part of the development. I mean, there are things that you've got notes tabs and all sorts of things in your activity records, and perhaps you would be able to use those as a basis for uploading things. So there are ways around things. It's just that at the moment, they will be slightly longer winded than any future development.
Thank you. We also have quite a few questions about templates, and you've already mentioned some for GDPR and disclosure there, Anna. Will there be a standard template for evaluation reports or anything like that to produce consistency?
Can I jump in there? So I think implicit in the way that people will submit to the HEAL is that this provides a kind of standardized response, because there'll be particular fields that we're asking you to fill out, and the exact decision about what those fields are is something that this consultation will support. So we're going to decide what those fields are, and that will provide a kind of standardized template for submission to the HEAL. But in terms of the actual reports, I think that's possibly something TASO already has. We do have standardized templates for research protocols and also reports, and we'd love to see those used for submission into the HEAL. And then HEAT also have a number of templates which they use. Anna, I don't know if you want to give a particular shout out to any of those.
So we've got our evaluation plans tool report, which if you populate an evaluation plan, you can then download a report for that which summarizes all the information that you've entered in, and that would be perfect to upload as a file attachment. It includes the theory of change, but also gives more detail about things like the specific outcomes and how you plan to measure them, so that it's nice and detailed. And I think as a sector, we can learn a lot from seeing each other's evaluation plans, and particularly the output of that. So I think that would be a great example of something to share through a file attachment to the HEAL. There's a question that came through from Helen about whether that would be auto-imported. So going back to what Rachel was saying, at the moment, the answer is no to the word auto worried me slightly, and it will be no to an auto import. However, it really will just be a few clicks, because it will be a case of downloading that report from one part of the system and then uploading it to the HEAL submission. So hopefully also not too problematic.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Sorry, the delays is me just grouping questions and finding ways to answer several questions at once to squeeze as much in as possible. So there was a question also about whether new report, it's just the HEAL is just for new reports, and equally whether it's just for new APPs or current APP cycle. Will the HEAL include other reports retrospectively or non-APP?
So I can answer that. We have, I mean, we've completed our scoping and planning phase of the HEAL, and we have a draft inclusion criteria, which is basically just a long list of what we want people to submit and things that will be kind of eligible for submission. At the moment, those eligibility criteria or inclusion criteria state that there's no time restriction. So you can submit old reports, you can submit new reports, and it's going to be a broad pool of evaluations. That is still subject to consultation. So if we got massively strong feedback that there should be a time cutoff, we would consider that, but that's not currently the plan.
Wonderful. To go also onto the ethics side of things, there's a specific question from a small specialist provider. If there isn't an ethics committee involved, how are you going to ensure that these providers are able to submit outputs?
Yeah. So I'll go first on this, but Anna and Rachel, chip in if you have anything extra to add, which is that we were just discussing this briefly during the breakouts because we could see some of the questions, and I think the vast majority of providers who have a research function, well they will have an ethics committee, and so what we would be looking for is those this is a broader point about publication and just making sure that if you're publishing a report, you have the appropriate permissions from your institutions to do that. The HEAL is one place you can publish, but wherever you want to publish, you're going to have the right permissions to do so, and your ethics committee will be a really important part of that. We do have, TASO has commissioned guidance on research ethics, and that's on our website, which you can take a look at. But if there are issues for small and specialist providers in this space, I'd like to find out more about that. And we do actually, we're starting a new project this year, specifically to support small and specialist provider evaluation. So I think that will be something that we work on intensively. If the HEAL is a big issue, then we can focus in on that. But I think that will be something we'll need to pick up with you. And actually, the person who submitted the question, I'd love to hear from you after this call. If you could submit an email, then we can pick up with you directly. Anna, do you have anything extra to add on that? No.
Oh, sorry, just took a while to unmute. Yeah, I think no, I think you covered it. But the collaborative model is, I think, something that it works well for small specialist providers in terms of outreach delivery, and there's more that we can do to help try and bring those providers together in terms of outreach. So I think that could work well here too.
Great. There's a couple of questions about HEAT membership that I'm going to lump into one. Feel free to take them separately. So one is around HEAT members who don't have the right role they are a HEAT member, but they don't have the right role to submit to the HEAL. Will they be able to circumnavigate it and create their own logins? I think there's also another one about what happens if a member used to be a member of HEAT, but then they leave. Do they create a new login? And a third question about whether they will be able to change the person who is responsible for the project in the HEAT, if someone changes or if there's multiple research documents, but they're for projects that they haven't necessarily been involved in.
Okay, shall I go?
Yeah, you go, Rachel.
Okay, you go and you join in, Anna, because that was quite a lot there. Okay, so just to reiterate, so we're differentiating between people who are not HEAT members, and they will apply to get a login. Okay, so for those people, I know that there's been a question about this as well. We are still having discussions about whether that person and that organisation will have a limit on user numbers. So that, I think that's still to be ironed out. Okay, so for those of you who are HEAT members, we are not asking you to make lots of new roles for people. Okay, what we're doing is using the existing HEAT model, which means that there is a HEAT coordinator who is able to assign and de-assign roles. Okay, so all we're saying is that there will be a new available role, which is to allow people to publish to HEAL, and that the heat coordinator will have control over who gets that permission. So it's not a completely new role per se, it's a new option. Is that a good way of describing it, Anna? It's like a new option available to you,
Exactly.
which the heat coordinator can restrict in the same way that they can restrict other things, like whether you can read all the reports, whether you can delete data, all those things. So it's going to function in exactly the same way. So that's how that works. So what was the first one, Tatiana? So that's just to set the scene. If you could just remind me what the first bit was.
Sorry. There was one also about heat members who aren't in the right role circumnavigating the system.
Okay, you won't be able to circumnavigate the system. It's all down to the heat coordinator, who has the ability to restrict roles and what different people can do.
And you'd never be able to belong to a heat member organisation and then be able to register as a non-member to be able to get access to the HEAL, because you'd have to email our support desk and then we'd see that you were a member. So we'd point you back to your coordinator.
There won't be any rogue uploads in that sense. And for members who leave heat?
Leave heat? Oh. It's very, very rare because we are such good value for money. But if an organisation sadly did need to leave heat, then there's a whole process that we need to go through, where we need to remove data from the system and share that back with you and things like that. So we still need to follow that process, and then you would join but you'd still be able to use the HEAL and have access to the HEAL submission part of heat as a non-member, and so that would all still work, but you would just lose access to all other parts of heat, all in that menu on the left hand side, and your view would look very different, and you'd only see the HEAL submission part of heat. But for all intents and purposes, you could still presume you could use your same login details.
Lovely. I have another question for you, Anna and Rachel, about whether it's anticipating that people could upload their existing TOC templates to the HEAL, and how will that work?
So at the moment, I think, as Anna said before, you would download from the evaluation plans tool sort of area. You would download them and then upload them like any other attachment onto the HEAL. And as I was saying before, that's not to say that in the future we might not have some way of linking them directly, but at the moment it's going to be a sort of couple of clicks manual process, in the same way that you would upload any other attachment. But you can download all those things from the HEAT website, so you won't have to recreate it. You will just download it from that part of the HEAT system.
Great, thank you. And this question has come up a couple of times at conference as well. But what will be the process of archiving or removing? I might add there editing, because that's come up elsewhere, content from and to the HEAL, and also will TASO be the appointed librarian of the HEAL, in quotation marks?
As someone who comes from a long line of librarians, it would be my dream to merge my current role with that title too. But yeah, so TASO, we are taking an ongoing role in looking after the HEAL in collaboration with HEAT. So it falls to us to make sure that it's a stable collection over time. And we are currently, this is part of the consultation, because we know there might be things that you want to tweak or change in your submission, typos, or the name of a university spelt wrongly, for example, that are perfectly fine to jump in and twiddle around with the typing. But we don't want to completely lose stability in the collection, so we're thinking about how we make sure we preserve at least a stub of entries, because we want to be able to track the evaluation library over time and understand if there's a growth in particular types of methods or particular types of providers submitting. So the ability to kind of delete or change or modify entries is something that we're basically consulting on at the moment. And the best way we do that whilst preserving the ability of the library to be a useful resource for us in understanding the evaluation landscape.
Lovely. Thank you. There's also a suggestion, sorry, a question about the requirements of journals or conference papers, because some journals might require providers to hold back their data before that publication happens, and how does that fit in with the HEAL?
Yeah, so I would think about the kind of reports that you would submit to the HEAL as preprints or working papers. If you are preparing a journal article, it's fairly common practice now to also have a manuscript that you might share in a more timely way, either through a kind of institutional working paper series or through something like ResearchGate. Have I got the name right? I have, haven't I? And the idea is that that provides a more timely way to share both the learning but also get feedback on your paper. My understanding is that journals would see preprints as something other than publication, and I think there is a move towards being kind of understanding that the motivation to share things in a more timely way, but check with the journal. So if you have your heart set on publishing in a particular journal, just check with them first, and they should be very transparent and clear about whether publishing a preprint or a working paper would jeopardize your opportunity of publishing there later. But if you have a look, for example, on Nature, they seem to be fairly open to preprints, and that's a really, really big journal. So that's indicative of where the industry is moving, I think.
Thank you. We've got another question about the submission process that someone submitted before the webinar. And that's about how would consortiums and collaborations work? And if the submitter submits information that's pulled through from the login, how will they indicate some collaboration? There was also another question about whether collaborators could edit or veto information if they disagreed with it in some way.
Sorry, Anna.
Do you want me to, from a technical perspective, we have been thinking about this as well, because collaboration is something that is being encouraged, quite rightly so. We want to make sure that we can support you to submit a collaborative evaluation piece. So at the moment, we are looking at the option, I think it showed on that general tab, that you would be able to add partners. There's potentially some functionality where if all of your partners are HEAP members, you will be able to log in to view the same submission form and record and look at it together and make edits to it. For non-HEAP members, or if any of the partners are not HEAP members, they won't have logins to that sharing part of the system and functionality, so that won't be possible. However, you will be able to download everything in your submission form from HEAT before publishing and submitting through to the HEAL website. So even for non-members, you will be able to always get out the information you've put in. So that will come out as for probably a Word document. You'll just be able to download it all, and then you could send it off to your partners via email and make sure that you get confirmation from them that they're happy for you to submit that.
Nothing further to add, except that it's come up. This is definitely one of the issues that the consultation has already thrown up. So we're thinking about it really carefully, because we know for some of you it's going to be really key.
Lovely. We also have a question about the evaluation registry, as some people in the sector might be aware that the evaluation registry has been launched, and why the HEAL hasn't been combined with that.
So we don't own the evaluation registry. The evaluation registry is put together by the Cabinet Office to pull together evaluations from across government. And it's really exciting, actually. It does also seek to bring together evaluations from the What Works movement, and it's a publicly accessible resource which you can take a look at now. It was previously closed off to just some people, but now you're literally able to go and look at it. I think that there is value. We're looking at the evaluation registry and how we most meaningfully input into it, because we do work closely with the Cabinet Office and the team who developed this, and we're well joined up with their activities. But I think there is value in a resource specifically for the higher education sector, because there is so much we have in common as people working on evaluations in HE that perhaps would be washed out by being featured as part of a much, much bigger database of evaluations. And once we have the HEAL in place, there may be opportunities to do more of that knowledge brokering and fostering a community, which is much harder to do when you're part of something much, much bigger. So I think the HEAL is a kind of instrumental in building that identity and being a focal point for the work TASO does to bring that community together.
Brilliant. Just quickly as well, to go back to the submission process, we've just had a quick question come in that I think might be useful. Do your submissions save in real time?
Well, that sounds like a heat question. That's something we are still looking at the moment. You will certainly be able to save it before publishing it. But whether you would, I think it's likely that you would have to click save. So it wouldn't save like when you're editing something on a Google Doc and it saves automatically for you. That's something that Heat database functionality we don't have at the moment. We are looking at some sort of prompt to remind people to save, because we're quite conscious that you really don't want to be inputting a lot of information and then to lose it because of any timeout issues. So we are looking at that. But I suppose that, yeah, what I can confirm is that you will definitely be able to save it before you submit, and you'll be able to save it as you go along, but you probably will have to click a button to do that.
Lovely. There's plenty more questions. A lot of them are suggestions for us to do, so I'm not going to address them here, but just to let you all know that we are listening to them. There was a suggestion for us to create a brief consultation and a briefing maybe into the proposed terms and conditions of the HEAL. There's also a suggestion, for example, on creating a provider area so that HEPs can see what is going on about pre-populated fields, also some search and filter suggestions as well. So we will have a look at all of those, because we don't have the answers yet. We can't say that will exist. That's why we're asking you, and we're going to see what we can build into that. And if there's no more burning questions, I'm just going to check one last time onto our Q&A. I might end us there. Thank you all. And thank you, Anna, Rachel and Eliza, for answering those questions.
Thanks, Tatiana. I think we need to flag also that people can submit into the Google Forms until May 31st. So if you have not had your opportunity to get on the Slido today, or something comes up later, just please do submit, and we really are reading them all. And I think it falls to me just to wrap up and say thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. A slightly different format to some of our other TASO webinars. We've actually seen your faces, albeit briefly, and you've seen each other's faces, which is nice in an online breakout room format. But please do stay engaged with this. This is just the beginning of the journey for the HEAL, and we're really excited about what we're going to build and then test and refine with you over the coming weeks and months. So yeah, watch this space. We'll come back to you soon, but thank you and have a really lovely rest of your afternoon. And thank you to Anna and Rachel for joining us as well.